I will be able to power this DC fridge for weeks and weeks and weeks with this unit right here. All right, calm down, John. We're just going on a camping trip. We're only going to be gone for a few nights. The Jackery would do just fine. So the power goes out. You have your massive power station that could power your fridge for 13 plus hours. That's great. But what do you do when you know you just need a little bit of power for a little bit of time? Like you're going to the park for a couple hours, you just need to keep your phone charged. Or what about if you're going on a camping trip and it's only going to be for like one night and you just need to power a fan or some minor things? What do you do in those situations? And of course, that's when the little 300 watt inverter power stations come into the mix. Let's find out a little bit more about that. Let's get into why these still do make sense to have in 2026 when they have much bigger power stations for actually pretty comparable in price. But when it comes to these little units, you're paying for more size than actual functionality because you need something that's small, something that's very portable, something that you can just grab with your, the handle and you can throw it into the back seat of your car. Doesn't take up a lot of space, That's what you need when you're buying something like this. And you just need something that's going to be efficient, small, and powerful enough to where just in case you need to run something that's 250 watts, this can still handle it. All of these can handle that, which is a good thing. It's not like you're restricted to 100 watts of power output. They still do have 300 watts. Some of them are capable of surging up to 450 watts. So you could still in a pinch run a lot of things with these units and they can definitely still get you by. Now, as you can tell in the B-roll footage, not all AC inverters is created equally. As the name brand units, the Gendome, the Ampace, the Jackery, even the Gricel and the Allway, those aren't really necessarily name brand units, but they're definitely on the higher end of name brand, I would say, compared to something like this unit, which is called Solapup. Never heard of it. You probably never will hear of it because it's probably going to be discontinued in the next 6 months to a year. I believe they actually still do sell this unit on Amazon. And I've had this unit for over a year and a half and it still works perfectly fine. But when it comes down to actual functionality, it's not going to perform as well as a Jackery or as, the actual Gendome or the Ampace. It's not going to come nowhere near that. And as you saw in the B-roll footage, it was barely able to handle a little drill that is capable of producing around 250 running watts. It does have a bigger surge of probably closer to about 350, but it couldn't even come close to handling it. It aired out right away. And that just goes to show, the difference in what you're getting for, quality to, actual money. You do spend a little bit more for the name brands, but you do get a lot more functionality out of them. So it just comes down to, what you're specifically looking for. And in this case, when it's a 300 watt inverter, you're not really expecting it to run a whole lot, so yeah, it's good that these name brand units actually surge higher, can actually, withstand the wattage a lot better. But in the long run, you're not really buying these units to run 350 watts, or surge into 400 watts. That's just a little bonus. If it's able to handle that, that's a great thing, because like I said, there's gonna be a time where you're in an emergency and you need to power something real quick that maybe surges up to 350 watts or more, like a coffee maker, something like that. If you go camping with these units, you wanna make sure that for 98% of people, I'm not a coffee drinker myself, but I know everyone else is, you wanna make sure that this can handle a coffee maker because if you're there on your camping trip and you go to set your morning up and you can't even brew a cup of coffee one of these, that's gonna be a major, major problem. And you're gonna be so sad and upset that your little power station that you bought can't even make a cup of coffee the morning, following morning. So, that's something you gotta really look into. But I wanted to kind of point that out, the Gricel is not really a huge name brand power station player in this game. And same with the Allway, this Allway right here, not many people have even heard of Allway, but these are real Amazon brands right here because they sell very highly on Amazon, compared to the Ampace. Not many people heard of that, but it's actually a really good name brand power station and they make whole home backup solutions as well. So, it comes down to that, are you willing to save that extra 50 bucks to run a no name brand power station that may or may not run the little essentials that you need it to run? That's where you got to kind of see which one makes the most sense to you and which one justifies the money opposed to one or the other. Now getting into connectivity, some people may like having Wi-Fi, some people might not, but if you do like having it, the Jackery is equipped with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. The Gendome has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and same with the Ampace. So these three units right here do not have any Wi-Fi or Bluetooth capabilities, and some people will see that as a must-have feature, you do have to have app controlled, because hypothetically, let's say you're in a tent and your power station's 20 feet away from you, you want to be able to control it with an app, because that is a nice feature to have. You want to be able to turn it on, turn it off, and not actually have to have the unit right next to you. So, like I said, some people might like that, some people might not like it, so it just depends. I'm an app guy. I like having, the Wi-Fi features and the actual ability to turn something on and off, and opposed to not being able to do that unless you manually physically go to the unit. So that's another thing you got to figure in for the price on the higher end units. So when it comes to actual battery capacity of these units, so these are all 300 watt inverters, but they all have different actual capacity. They're all life peelable power stations, which is the best for any sort of long-term use, 3,000 cycles. Some of them are rated for more like 2,500 cycles, but still, 2,500 cycles is a very long time, 5, 6, 7 years of daily use, which you're not gonna be doing that. But they all are very comparable in size. You got some that have the handles, like the Jackery, the Solopop, the Grisel have built-in handles. Now, I don't know if you like the handles, that depends on what you're going for, but easy portability for sure. Being able to just lift it up real quick, 100% handles really work well for that. But when you talk about capacities, that's where it varies just a little bit. So the Jackery is rated for 256 watt hours. The Solopop is rated for 298 watt hours. So almost identical size, but it's got a little bit more watt hour to it. And then once you get over to the Gendome over here, this unit's pushing to 288 watt hours. And then the amp pace right here is 266 watt hours. So all are in the same class as far as, form and factor. They all weigh about 10 pounds. Some of them weigh a little bit less than that. But it really comes down to packing as much battery in these little power stations as possible, because when you can get 288 watt hours, that 40 watt hours makes a big difference. It's something that you would never think, but it could run your 30 watt fan for another 4 hours, and it's just one of those things where it's a big difference when you're talking, overall runtime. Now, capacity rating, that's something that's very, very important when you're only working with 250, 288 watt hours. You need as much capacity as you could possibly get. And I'll tell you right now, so the name brand units, the Ampace, the Gendome, the Jackery, they're all average, to say the least. I mean, they're about 84%, AC inverter power, which is average in the industry of portable power. Now, when you start talking about these no name brand units, they're more efficient. So that comes down to not needing as much sensors and things that will draw power. They're not as strict like the big name brand units are, where they have to have more stuff, more electronics in them to keep them as safe as they are. Not saying that these ones aren't safe, they're very safe. I've been using these for years, never had an issue with them. But you do get more inverter capacity. So like this unit right here, after a year and a half, I'm still reaching 87% efficiency. This unit right here, I'm still reaching 85% efficiency after almost 2 years. And then the one that surprises me the most is the all-way. So I've had this unit for about a year now, maybe a little bit longer, and I can still get a 90% capacity rating, which is very, very impressive for any type of unit, no name brand, low quality, whatever. To get a 90% efficiency rating on the inverter after a year is very impressive, but that's where it comes down to, what do you like the most, what do you don't like the most? Do you like having a nicer screen and the faster charging, or do you not really care about the nicer screen and the faster charging? You just want more AC efficiency, or do you care about more DC power? The Gendome has 140 watt Type C, 2 ports. Is that more important than the fast charging and the, the nicer screen or whatever? This one also has wireless charging, so you get a lot more features, And going back to the beginning of this video, these 3 are Wi-Fi compatible, so you do get a nice app with them. They do function very well with the app. And you definitely get what you pay for, but AC inverter wise, it's really medium at that. It's at best, I would say it's medium, Real quick, let's get into the solar specs on these units. So all these units are going to be very comparable when it comes to solar input and what they're each capable of handling. Now, these are definitely portable units. They're designed to go camping with you, or if you're about to just take it out for a few hours. So they're designed to have just a single foldable panel. That's it. It's not designed to run rigid panels off these. You're supposed to just put a portable solar panel out in the grass and then keep it charged like that, like a 60 watt or 100 watt solar panel. That's it, and they all do it a little bit differently. So for the Jackery, you have to use the Type C port right here to be able to charge this from solar. And then same with like the Grisel. So this one has a DC in right here, so I can actually zoom that in real quick. So to charge this, you have to use the DC in port right there, which is the big barrel port. And then same with the input on the all-way down here, you have to use that type of input. So, Solopop has the same input. This one has the same input. So, when it comes to solar, neither one of these are actually really good with solar, unfortunately. So you're gonna get literally the bare minimum with a foldable solar panel, and that's it. They're not gonna have XT60 or Anderson or nothing like that. So something you gotta get used to is buying adapters to be able to charge these with solar if you want. Let's get into the charging of these units, you know, something that's pretty important because you want to be able to make sure you can charge these quick and efficiently. Since these are all LiFePO4 power stations, you know, they do withstand a lot of abuse with the charging, but here's where the money kind of plays a big role in this. Now for the Jackery unit, you do have a standard plug right here that goes into this computer cable style, and that charges it very quickly, upwards of 260 watts, I believe. And then you compare that to something like the Gricel. This unit right here, it only has this type of barrel port connection right here. So you're gonna get a much slower charge rate because you have to use one of these. So you have to use an actual charging brick, which is this right here. And these are rated typically for about 60 watts of charge. So they're very, very slow. They have the barrel port on the end, and it's not as quick as it is when you have the computer style plug. Nowhere near as quick as this style plug right here. And you do get so much more charge when you use this style plug as far as speed goes and performance goes. And there's another key feature that you gotta understand too. So when you're using these type of power bricks right here, these are not really meant for UPS. So yeah, I mean, technically you could keep the unit plugged into the wall, but you're only very limited to 50 to 60 watts of power. So if you're trying to power a 150 watt, you know, computer PC, it's not gonna work because this will not be enough to power the computer and power to charge the unit while it's running a UPS. Now, if you switch to this cable right here that plugs directly into the wall, this is designed to run through UPS. So you plug this into the unit and you plug in the computer to it, and then you have actual true UPS. And when you start talking about these cheaper units, you know, you're not gonna get like a full functional UPS feature. They may claim they still have a 20 millisecond UPS, but it's very, very not something I would rely on personally. Like I would much rather power my, $2,000 computer system with a Jackery or with a Gen Dome than something like the Gricel or the Alway. Now here's where it gets a little tricky because, the Jackery offers the fast charge, the Ampace offers the fast charge, but the Gen Dome does not. And as you can tell on this unit, there's no input anywhere else on this unit except for the very front. So you only have the 140 watt Type-C charge port, which is still fine, but once again, you're not going to use this as a UPS feature if you're only able to power it from Type-C 140 watt. All right, guys, let's get to some final thoughts now for these 300 watt power stations. So clearly you saw some of the functions and features of these units and how well one performs over the other. And if there is generally a big difference between the name brand Jackery opposed to the Alway, just overall. So let's get into a little bit of I would say must-haves when it comes to these units. So LiFePO4 absolutely is a must. You gotta have LiFePO4. Now, if you're just using it for camping once every 6 months, I guess a lithium battery is okay, but for a few dollars more, you might as well just go with the LiFePO4. It makes the most sense. They have to be small and portable. Clearly, they have to have the handle either built in that's retractable like this, or one that's built into the back like the Gen Dome, where you can literally grab it from the back and you can pick it up from this handle right here. So, those are two very important things. Of course, outside of that, they gotta have strong DC output because most of your appliances or most of the things that you go camping with or that you need for just a few hours are gonna be DC powered. You're not really gonna be 100% focused on the AC inverter, opposed to the Type-C ports. So in my opinion, to run a DC fan, to run a DC light, the USB and the DC outputs can be one of the most important things when you purchase one of these power stations. And aside from that, you need fast charging. That's a must. In 2026, you can't have a power station that takes 4 to 5 hours to charge. That just makes zero sense. And they all have to have fast charging. In my opinion, that's not negotiable. So, you want them lightweight. They are under 10 pounds, I would say. So, none of them are over 10 pounds. So that's very perfect, And, you just want to have good, I would say good inverter. You want it to surge pretty good, because you don't want to buy a power station that's rated for 300 watts and as soon as it hits 270, the whole thing conks out. You don't want that, and they do make power stations like that, and those are ones you should stay very far away from. If it's rated for 300 watts, it should be able to run 300 watts from 100% down to 0. Is it healthy to do that? No, but it's designed for 300 watts, so you should be able to handle that. That's what it's marketing as, and you should get what you pay for. That's the bottom line, You do want to have a good UPS on these units if you plan on using them for strictly home backup for like your computer or for like your Wi-Fi router, stuff like that, your alarm system for your house. You do want to have good UPS in case the power goes out. Boom, this clicks on keeps it powered for, you know, the few hours or however long it can with the built-in battery pack. And that's where these kind of are limited, because not only do they have a small inverter, but they all have small battery packs. So, you know, if you run a 60 watt load on these, which is really nothing, it's only gonna last for maybe 2.5 hours, maybe 3 at the most, you know? So that's where you kind of want to look at, you know, if you need something more for home strictly backup, you're going to want to look at something bigger like the AC70 from Bluetti or the Pecron F1000 LFP, because for that you get way more inverter capability and you get way more battery capacity. So, you know, that's where you're getting into the kind of like the home backup-ish stuff, opposed to something you're going to take with you, put it in your car, and go camping with. That's what these are for. So that's why you're not really strictly worried about UPS, in my opinion, because you're not really using these for UPS unless it's something dedicated for just a small 15 watt appliance. That's a different story, but that's a whole nother video in itself, you know? Aside from that, you want to be able to have a low fan speed or low sound from the fans. You don't want them to be very B sounding and very high, you know, in your ear the whole time. So you want to have a low fan speed, low frequency fan, I should say, that is not ear piercing when you're trying to sleep next to this thing in your tent or whatever it might be, you know? And aside from that, high efficiency, if you do use the AC inverter, is very important, because you're limited on such a small battery pack that if you're only getting 70% of your AC inverter capacity, that's really low, and that's almost a waste of money in my opinion. So you want to make sure you see it above 86, 87, which should be more than doable for these little power stations in my opinion. And aside from that, I would say, you know, clean sine wave, that's a must. That's why I don't even test that, because every single power station in 2026 has a clean sine wave, so that's not a big deal at all. And then the solar is going to be the next thing. So you want to have fast solar charging, because you can charge these up very quickly with very little sun, you know? So if you can get a power station of this caliber that has 100 watt, you know, capability of solar input, that's the way to go. If you can get one with even higher, that would be the best thing, because one of these power stations with a 200 watt solar input, it would be awesome, because you would charge it in less than 2 hours from solar, you know? And outside of all that, I would say the built-in light would be the last thing I would talk about for the most part. If that's something you prefer to have, you know, like the Gen Dome has its light right up here in the front. It's nice, you know, it's not the brightest thing in the world, but if you're in a pitch black area, it will definitely light up the tent and keep everything, you know, noticed and what you're trying to look for. Now the Jackery light, on the other hand, it's a spotlight, so you know it's not really gonna do a good enough job of lighting a larger area. It's gonna be very pinpoint, you know. It's not gonna be like the light bar that's on top of this Gen Dome right here, that you could very easily turn this around and face it towards the wall of inside of a tent, and it's gonna illuminate the whole entire tent, you know. So that's pretty much my main things I would say about the 300 watt power stations and what to really look for when you're trying to buy one of these. Do these have a place in this market? Absolutely, you know. I'm still on the fence when it comes to, like, for maybe $150 more or even less, you can get something that has 3 times the capacity, 3 times the output, and it has way more solar input. It's just an all-around better machine, you know. But if you don't have the room for something, you know, twice the size of this or 3 times the size of this, then these are perfect. So just bring with you to the park for you know, a midday lunch, or you know, whatever you want to do, or even for a camping trip. If you plan on doing your camping trip and you spend a day, maybe 2, this will get you by. It will run your DC power fridge, no problem. It'll light up whatever you need to light up. You can recharge your phones, no problem at all, you know. But that's where these kind of have their place in this field, I would say. So outside of that, that's all I got for you guys. I appreciate y'all for watching and subscribing, commenting, liking, everything. I'll catch you guys on the next one.